Hi guys and welcome back to the channel. In today's video we will extensively analyze the performance of line artillery in the game. We will talk about its cost effectiveness, advantages and disadvantages. Ultimately trying to answer the question, is line artillery useless in HOI4? For this comparison we're going to use a complex testing scenario, comparing artillery heavy divisions to divisions with some artillery and divisions with no artillery at all. If that sounds interesting, then this is the right video for you. As usual, if you have been following the channel and enjoying my content, please do not forget to support the channel by liking the video and subscribing. It really helps. Now, before we get into this detailed comparison though, in case you are looking for a quick answer, no, line artillery is far from useless. And despite what part of the HOI4 community seems to believe, while it might not always be the most cost-effective option, line artillery can significantly boost your offensive divisions. Let's find out how. Now, if you already watched my latest video on the best doctrines for infantry templates, some of these will sound familiar. By the way, if you haven't watched it yet, make sure to check it out. I will include a link in the description. As you can see, for this comparison I made a spreadsheet in which I included all details and results. We're going to check it together now, but if you have a tier 2 membership to the channel, you can find it in the shared folder together with all of the screenshots from my test runs. Now, before we start looking at the numbers, I also need to explain the testing scenario and why it was chosen. In this kind of videos, you usually find artificially set scenarios in which a given number of divisions face each other with different templates to determine which is more effective. And while this is totally fine, what people fail to account for with this on-paper testing is the complexity of a real scenario. Therefore, in order to properly evaluate line artillery, I loaded my run with France just before the war on the Axis. It is a very tough and challenging war, with France alone against Italy and Germany. There is a bit of everything involved, as we start with a small air force, but we gradually gain air superiority. Of course, there is a naval invasion of Italy and a static defense against Germany. We then proceed to push in several different types of terrains, sometimes with full planning and sometimes in a hurry. I will also include a link to this run in the description in case you want to check it out yourself. Now, the advantage of this testing scenario is that it is as real as it gets. This is how good line artillery is in practice, not in theory. Of course, at the same time, the disadvantage of this scenario is that RNG inevitably plays a role in it, and of course I play a role in it, and over the course of a long war, there are higher chances that I make a mistake and affect the results. Although, in my opinion, it is not necessarily a bad thing that human errors are also accounted for. Now, let's finally get into some numbers. And first of all, as I was mentioning, for this testing I used 3 different 30 width templates, a 9-4 artillery heavy one, a balanced 12-2 template, and a no line artillery 15-0 template. Now let's look at the stats very briefly, and for this it's probably more convenient to check my spreadsheet as I listed them all down here. So as you can see here, the only advantage in terms of stats for my 9-4 artillery heavy template is in regard to soft attack. Every single other stat is better with less artillery, and it gets better the lower the amount of artillery, as you can see here. Moreover, templates with less artillery also get cheaper in terms of production costs. As you can see, with only 2 artillery we save about 8%, and we save up to 17% with no line artillery in our template. At the cost of additional manpower, so depending on the situation, if you lack manpower, no artillery may be worse, but usually manpower is not the biggest issue, so these templates are cheaper and offer better stats. And this is why, on paper, it looks like line artillery is indeed useless. You get only a bit more soft attack, but you lose everything else. This is probably why many people say that line artillery is not very good. However, let's briefly look at the meaning of these stats. What do they do? Well, HP is how much damage the division can take before being destroyed. It is a useful stat, but it is not the most important. Organization is for how long a division can fight or move efficiently. And this is a very important stat because without organization you can literally do nothing and you start taking HP damage. However, generally speaking, divisions with better offensive potential need less organization, because they are going to win their fights faster. This is why, for example, tank divisions usually have lower organization, and that's because they are not going to be engaged in a fight for as long as infantry. Now, recovery is how much organization is recovered per hour. Supply use determines how many supplies are needed before running into penalties, and of course, lower supply use is great. However, this also depends on the scenario. There are some areas of the world, for example, my testing is done in Europe, in which supplies are not usually a big issue. Then soft attack. Soft attack is the damage dealt versus low hardness divisions. In short, the damage you deal to infantry divisions. Not only, however, to infantry divisions, to all divisions with mostly infantry. So, for example, when you look at tanks fighting Germany, their tanks are actually mostly motorized with some light tanks, and those divisions are fairly low hardness divisions. So soft attack is the most important stats even against some armored divisions. Soft attack is, in my opinion, the most important stat in single player when it comes to offense. Finally, we have defense, which is the damage the division can sustain while on the defensive. This is an important stat, but of course it is only important for defensive purposes. When we look again at all of these stats, yes, no infantry divisions are better in almost everything, even significantly better. Look at this, plus 48%, plus 30%. But the only stat they are not better at, soft attack, is the most important stat when it comes to the offense. So now it's time to look at some of the testing results in here. And the testing was done in this way. Now, first of all, we use my offensive army to naval invade Italy and capitulate them. So here in the testing, I wrote down the average amount of casualties I took after capitulating Italy and the average amount of days it took to capitulate Italy. After Italy goes down, we move both offensive armies in here and we start pushing into Germany, all the way to Berlin and then all the way to Vienna to end the war. So at that point, I wrote down the average amount of casualties that I took at the end of the war with Germany and the average amount of days that it took to capitulate Germany as well. And the number that you can find here is the average across several test runs. Now, since the war against Germany is longer, usually the data in terms of casualties and days against Germany is more representative of the real value of the template. Now, as you can see from here, quite obviously, the 9-4 template offered the best results overall. It has the lowest average casualties both against Italy and Germany, with 2 artillery-only armies going up 38% in casualties against Italy, 13% against Germany, and a 0 artillery template 53% up in terms of casualties, 38% up in terms of casualties against Germany. Also, in terms of the duration of the war, my 9-4 template performed the best, followed by the 2 artillery template, actually only 11% slower against Italy and only 5% slower against Germany, and finally the no artillery template, which was 25% slower against Italy and 23% slower against Germany. In all of these, of course, you should also consider the production cost. For example, this template was 5% slower with 13% more casualties, but it was also 8% cheaper. Now, in terms of the key points, as I was mentioning, this heavy artillery template has only an advantage in terms of soft attack, so it is designed mainly for offensive duties. It achieved the best results in my testing scenario, but it is also the most expensive template. It proves, in my opinion, the utility of line artillery and the importance of soft attack. It is my favorite offensive template and it did not disappoint, proving that line artillery can indeed be worth the investment. However, this balanced 12-2 template performed very well. It is very well rounded and it offers overall balanced stats. For this reason, it can perform well both defensive and offensive duties. It performed really well in my testing scenario while also being 8% cheaper than my 9-4 template. And in addition to the good performance in here, it felt very effective and good to use. This is difficult to write down in a test, but there is also how it feels to use a template in the game, and this one felt really good. So I was very positively impressed by this template and I definitely plan to test it more in future. It is more balanced than my 9-4 template and can potentially be a better fit for several scenarios. Finally, let's get to this no artillery template. Now, it has fantastic defensive stats, but 30% less soft attack, that's painful. It can perform well defensively, but on the offensive, the performance was not as good. I really struggled to push in several situations which heavily impacted the war. Now let me make a couple of examples here because I think it's quite representative of how a complex scenario helps understanding the importance of certain stats. Now, at some point, while pushing Italy, I split my offensive army, keeping 14 divisions to push the northern part of Italy and 10 divisions to push the southern part of Italy. And one big advantage of the 9-4 template is that these 10 divisions were able to easily push alone southern Italy, so they didn't need any help pushing down south. However, both with my 12-2 and especially with the 15-0 template, I really struggled to push southern Italy without additional help. So what I had to do was, after being done with northern Italy, I had to send down all of the other offensive divisions to be able to capitulate Italy. And that slowed down the war a little bit. As a consequence of that, and overall as a consequence of the fact that we are slower to push without artillery, I ended up pushing for Vienna in Austria, in the Austrian mountains, in the middle of winter. I had to do this entire push in winter. While with my more offensive templates with more line artillery, I was able to get this push done before the beginning of winter. Now this massively affected the war because in winter it is extremely difficult to push in these terrains. Finally, this template is significantly cheaper than the line artillery versions, but it does require a lot more manpower, so it should be considered that if you lack manpower, this may not be the best template. Overall, I must say that low soft attack templates really do not fit my playstyle. I really struggled to push on several occasions and this affected the final results. Now I'm sure it could be a great template in the hands of a pro player with great micromanagement skills, but this one is not for me. Now, in terms of conclusions, let me say that line artillery is far from useless. It showed a significant improvement in offensive performance from my testing, both in terms of speeding up the war and reducing the casualties. Line artillery increases the production cost of the division while saving some manpower, so it works best with countries with a good industry and limited manpower, such as Italy. While countries with high manpower but a poor industry can benefit more from fewer line artillery battalions and more infantry battalions. China comes to mind as an example. Now, line artillery offers higher soft attack at the cost of lowering most other stats. In other words, line artillery increases the offensive capabilities of your divisions at the cost of their defensive capabilities. If you want a flexible template that can perform both offensive and defensive roles, then it would be better to opt for limited line artillery battalions, maybe 1 or 2 like in this template here. If you want to maximize the offensive potential of your template, on the other hand, while using a different template to defend, adding more line artillery battalions, 3 to 4, can offer some relevant advantages. Now, as a final comment, although my testing scenario was slightly favorable to line artillery, as my production in this run was optimized around my 9-4 template, it is undeniable that adding at least some line artillery to my divisions significantly boosted their offensive potential, speeding up the war and reducing the overall casualties. So while on paper infantry-only templates seem to have the better stats, the additional soft attack offered by line artillery resulted in a significant advantage when on the offense. Ultimately, while this testing is in no way offering a definitive answer as to the role of line artillery in HOI4, I think it is a great answer to all those people who seem convinced that it is just bad. And the answer is that depending on the scenario and on your playstyle, line artillery can be an incredibly useful tool to have. So my suggestion would be to go out there and test it yourself. See if it fits your playstyle. Don't just listen to the meta players saying that it is bad. As I always say, what works best for a pro player might not be what works best for you. Of course, if you test these templates, let me know in the comments which one you like the most and why. And this is really all for this video. I hope you enjoyed it and found it useful. If you did, please do not forget to support the channel by liking the video and subscribing. If you stayed with me until now, thank you for watching and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye bye!